In the United States, there is a cave that scientists refuse to fully explore because no human can survive inside for more than a few minutes. Discovered in the 1980s, this cave emits extremely high levels of toxic gas, making it impossible for people to breathe. But what's truly disturbing is that nothing should be alive inside, yet it is. Microorganisms have adapted to survive in conditions that should not support life, leading some scientists to believe that this cave may hold clues to how organisms could exist on other planets. In a private library in England, there exists an ancient manuscript with a chilling feature: it appears to be writing itself. Discovered in the 1700s, the book was completely blank when first found, but over time, letters and sentences began to appear on its pages. At first, scholars believed it was a chemical reaction causing faded ink to become visible. However, modern studies have shown that the writing is appearing for the first time. Some pages contain words in languages that did not exist when the book was first discovered. In a European monastery, there is a mechanical clock built in the 1400s that has been ticking continuously for centuries. Unlike normal clocks, this one does not tell time. Instead, its gears have been slowly moving toward a fixed point, one that it will reach in approximately 100 years. No one knows who built it, and historical records make no mention of its purpose. Some believe it was meant to mark the end of an important cycle, while others fear it is counting down to something unknown. Engineers who have studied the mechanism say that when the clock reaches its final position, something inside will activate, but no one knows what will happen when that moment arrives. In Prague Castle, one of the oldest castles in Europe, there exists a sealed chamber that no one has dared to open for centuries. Built in the 9th century, the castle has been home to kings, emperors, and historical figures, but one section of the structure hundreds of years. According to ancient documents, the room was sealed because a terrible event took place inside, something so disturbing that it was never spoken of again. Attempts to uncover its secrets have always been stopped, with officials citing preservation concerns. Deep in the Scottish Highlands, old legends tell of a hidden village that appears only once every century before vanishing again. The story first gained attention in the 1700s when travelers reported seeing an unfamiliar village with glowing lanterns, cobblestone streets, and people dressed in old-fashioned clothing. When they tried to return the next day, there was nothing but empty wilderness. One of the most famous encounters happened in 1891, when a group of hikers claimed to have found the village. They described speaking with the townspeople, who warned them to leave before sunrise. Only one man stayed behind, refusing to believe the tale, and when the others returned the next morning, both he and the village had disappeared. In 2018, a cargo ship suddenly washed ashore in Myanmar, a vessel that had been missing for nearly a decade. The ship, called the Sam Ratulangi PB-1600, had no crew, no cargo, and no sign of what had happened to it. It was completely intact, with no evidence of a crash, distress signal, or struggle. Authorities later determined that the ship had vanished in 2009 while en route to Thailand. Multiple search efforts had failed to find it, and it was declared lost at sea. Yet, almost 10 years later, the ship reappeared on land completely empty. There was no damage to suggest pirates or foul play, and investigators could not determine what had kept the ship adrift for so long. In 1932, a small town in the American Midwest known as Deering was home to about 600 residents. One morning, a passing traveler arrived only to find the entire town completely abandoned. Tables were set for breakfast, cars were parked on the streets, and shop doors were wide open, but every person was gone. Authorities launched a full-scale investigation, but no bodies, signs of struggle, or footprints leading away from the town were ever found. Even stranger, when state records were checked, every official document mentioning Deering had been erased. Maps that once marked the town had been altered, and government files that once listed its population had disappeared. It was as if Deering had never existed at all. For centuries, sailors have reported seeing an island in the North Atlantic that does not exist on any official map. Known as High Brazil, the island has been mentioned in historical texts, naval charts, and even first-hand accounts by explorers, yet no one has ever confirmed its existence. The most famous sighting occurred in 1497, when explorer John Cabot claimed to have landed on High Brazil. He described it as a lush green island with strange stone structures and no visible inhabitants. However, when a second expedition was launched, the island had vanished. Over the centuries, multiple sailors and pilots have spotted High Brazil, but each time it disappears before it can be reached. Some theories suggest that the island only becomes visible under certain atmospheric conditions, while others believe it may be a time anomaly, appearing and disappearing at unpredictable intervals. During the early years of space exploration, the Soviet Union kept many of its failed missions secret. However, in 1961, just before Yuri Gagarin officially became the first man in space, two Italian amateur radio operators claimed to have intercepted a disturbing transmission from a cosmonaut who was never acknowledged by the Soviet government. According to the recording, the cosmonaut was frantically sending messages to Earth, reporting that something had gone wrong with his spacecraft. His voice grew more panicked as he described his capsule drifting further into deep space, his oxygen running out, and his temperature rising. The final words captured on the recording were, "I am burning up. I am lost. I will not return." Before the signal abruptly cut off, the Soviet Union never admitted to launching another cosmonaut before Gagarin, and no official records exist of such a mission. However, some declassified documents suggest that there were several failed space flights before 1961 flights that were erased from history. In 1955, a commercial airliner known as Flight 914 took off from New York City bound for Miami, but somewhere along the route, the plane vanished from radar. After an extensive search, authorities declared the flight lost and all passengers were presumed gone. Then, in 1992, an air traffic control tower in Venezuela received a distress signal from an unknown aircraft. When the plane landed, officials were shocked to see that it was Flight 914, completely intact, with all passengers still inside, unaware that anything was wrong. The pilots and passengers believed they had been in the air for only a few hours. Their watches and calendars still showed the date as 1955. Even though 37 years had passed. Before officials could investigate further, the pilot reportedly panicked, restarted the engines, and took off again, disappearing into the sky. The plane was never seen again. An abandoned estate in Louisiana has been the source of strange reports for years. Locals claim that, on certain nights, a piano inside the house begins playing by itself. The mansion was once home to a wealthy family in the early 1900s, and the daughter was known for playing the grand piano every evening. However, after a sudden and unexplained family tragedy, the house was left abandoned and the piano was left untouched, despite there being no electricity or working mechanisms inside. Witnesses have described hearing soft, delicate notes drifting from the house. Some who have entered to investigate found the piano with its keys still moving, but no one sitting at it. In England, there is a bizarre case of a house that was seen, visited, and lived in until it suddenly ceased to exist. In 1965, a young couple moved into a quaint stone house in the countryside. They had photos, letters addressed to the house, and even guests who had visited. Then one day, after returning from a trip, they arrived at the location, but the house was gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned, completely gone. In its place was an empty field with no sign that a house had ever been there. Neighbors who had seen the house many times before suddenly had no memory of it. Records of the property were missing, and even photographs of the house had somehow become blurred or distorted. In Oregon, USA, there is a mysterious lake that completely vanishes and then refills itself as if nothing happened. Known as Lost Lake, the body of water drains into the ground through a giant hole, disappearing completely for months before slowly refilling again. The reason? Scientists have determined that the hole at the bottom of the lake leads to an underground lava tube, a natural tunnel left behind by volcanic activity thousands of years ago. But what makes it strange is that the water should flow out permanently, yet the lake always comes back. In Paris, there are reports of a hotel that doesn't appear on any map, website, or travel record, but dozens of people claim to have stayed there. Tourists recall checking in, sleeping in the rooms, and even speaking with hotel staff, but when they attempt to return, the hotel is gone. One of the most well-documented cases involved a pair of travelers in the 1970s who spent a night at a charming, old-fashioned hotel with antique decor and no modern amenities. When they returned days later, the hotel was no longer there, and locals insisted that no such hotel had ever existed in that area. Photos taken inside the hotel also mysteriously vanished from their cameras, leaving no evidence of its existence. Some believe it is an example of a time slip, where people unknowingly step into a past version of reality before returning to the present. Others believe the hotel is a phantom structure, appearing only to those who stumble upon it at the right time. In Antarctica, scientists drilling deep into the ice in 2013 made a chilling discovery: a massive underground lake that had been completely sealed off from the world for over 15 million years. Known as Lake Vostok, the water beneath the ice had never been touched by sunlight, meaning whatever lived inside it had evolved in complete isolation for millions of years. When researchers finally drilled through the ice and took samples, they found microorganisms that didn't match anything known to science. Some of the bacteria were so different from anything on Earth that scientists speculated they could be similar to life that might exist on other planets. Even stranger, some of the samples mysteriously vanished from laboratories, leading to theories that they contained something we were not meant to find. In a museum in Germany, there is an ancient mechanical clock that has been ticking for centuries. However, what makes it unsettling is that it appears to be counting down. The clock doesn't tell time like a normal one. Instead, its gears are slowly moving toward a fixed point. Experts estimate that, at its current pace, it will reach zero in approximately 100 years. The problem? No one knows what it's counting down to. The clock's origin is unknown, and there is no historical record of why it was built. Some believe it was part of an old astronomical calculation, while others fear it is a warning left behind by someone who knew something that we do not. For over a century, maps of the United States have included a small town in the Midwest that no one has ever been able to find in real life. Known as Arden Hollow, the town has been marked on various official maps since the late 1800s. However, every attempt to locate it in the real world has failed. There are no records of it ever being settled, no property deeds, and no evidence that it was ever inhabited. Yet for some reason, cartographers continue to include it in state maps, atlases, and even early GPS systems. Some believe it was a deliberate mistake placed by mapmakers to catch copyright violations. Others think it may have been a real town that somehow vanished from history, but left its name behind. In India, there is a river that has baffled scientists for decades because it occasionally reverses its flow, moving in the opposite direction. The phenomenon has been recorded multiple times over the years, and it happens without warning. The water begins flowing upstream instead of downstream, and after several hours or days, it reverts back to normal. Geologists have attempted to explain the phenomenon, suggesting underground shifts or pressure changes deep beneath the riverbed. However, no confirmed cause has been found, and no other river in the region behaves this way. In London, there is a historic hotel that has been in operation for over 200 years. Guests have reported a strange phenomenon. Some claim to have been given a key to room 306, but when they go to find it, the room doesn't exist. Those who have searched for it report seeing a door with the number 306 on it, but when they return later, the door is gone. Hotel staff insist that there is no room 306 and that any records of it being booked are a system error. However, security footage once captured something chilling. A guest attempting to enter the non-existent room, only for his key to pass straight through thin air. Some believe the room was part of the original hotel layout but was sealed off for unknown reasons. In the wilderness of Russia, there is a mountain where people refuse to camp overnight. For centuries, locals have told stories of strange lights appearing in the sky above the peak, compasses spinning wildly, and an overwhelming feeling of dread that forces travelers to leave before sundown. In 1997, a team of hikers attempted to spend the night at the summit to investigate the phenomenon. Around midnight, their radio communication abruptly ended. When a rescue team arrived the next day, they found the hikers' tents intact, their supplies untouched, but the hikers were gone. The only clue left behind was a single camera, which contained one final photograph, an image of the mountain peak, illuminated by an unknown, glowing object. In the mountains of Italy, there is an abandoned village that has stood empty for over a century. What makes it strange is that visitors often report hearing voices, laughter, and even footsteps, despite the fact that no one lives there. The village was once home to a thriving community, but in the late 1800s, its residents vanished seemingly overnight. Theories range from a sudden evacuation due to disease to something more mysterious, a mass exodus with no recorded reason. Hikers who pass through the village say they sometimes hear whispers in the wind, and those who stay too long often describe an overwhelming sense that they are being watched from the empty doorways. In 2009, air traffic controllers at an airport in South America were stunned when a small aircraft approached the runway. Without any communication from the pilot, the plane made a perfect landing, rolling to a stop exactly where it should have. But when airport personnel reached the cockpit, they made a chilling discovery. There was no one inside. The aircraft had taken off from a neighboring country, but contact was lost mid-flight. Search teams were sent to locate the pilot, but no remains were ever found. In Turkmenistan, there is a massive crater in the desert that has been burning continuously for over 5 decades. Known as the Door to Hell, this giant pit of flames was created in 1971 when Soviet scientists accidentally drilled into a massive underground gas reserve. To prevent toxic gases from spreading, they set the crater on fire, expecting it to burn out within a few weeks. But decades later, the fire is still going. The flames burn so intensely that it can be seen from miles away at night. And even after multiple attempts to extinguish it, the fire refuses to die. Off the coast of Scotland, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands on a desolate rocky island, a place where 3 lighthouse keepers vanished without a trace in 1900. When a supply ship arrived to check on the men, they found the lighthouse doors locked from the inside. Meals were half-eaten on the table, beds were unmade, and the logbook contained strange entries, describing a violent storm that never appeared in weather records. The final log entry simply read, "The storm has passed. The sea is calm. God is over all." But when the rescue crew searched the island, there was no trace of the 3 men. Even stranger, the lighthouse continued to operate for days after they vanished, as if someone had still been maintaining it. In 1985, the town of Villa Epecuén, Argentina, was completely submerged when a nearby dam collapsed. Within days, the town was swallowed by floodwaters, forcing all residents to evacuate, leaving behind their homes, businesses, and personal belongings. For over 25 years, the town remained hidden beneath the water, forgotten by time. Then, in 2009, something incredible happened. The waters began to recede. Slowly, the ruins of Villa Epecuén reappeared, as if the town was rising from its watery grave. Buildings, streets, and even rusted-out vehicles stood eerily intact, despite decades of submersion. In a private collection in France, there is a book written in the 14th century that appears to predict events that had not yet happened. The book contains detailed descriptions of inventions, celestial events, and even historical conflicts, many of which occurred centuries after it was written. It describes the discovery of electricity, submarines, and even airplanes long before such things were conceived. What makes this even more unsettling is that the author of the book remains unknown. The name listed in the manuscript has never been traced to any historical figure, and there is no evidence of how the writer could have had such knowledge. Deep in Siberia, there is a mountain that no one has ever successfully climbed, not because it is too steep or dangerous, but because those who attempt to reach the summit never return. For decades, locals have reported that hikers, climbers, and even researchers have all vanished without a trace upon reaching a certain altitude. One of the strangest cases happened in 1998 when a team of geologists set out to survey the area. They were in constant radio contact with their base until suddenly, all transmissions stopped. When a search party was sent, they found all the team's supplies, equipment, and even food completely untouched. But the geologists were gone. Helicopter surveys and thermal imaging have never found any sign of those who disappeared. A museum in Italy holds a centuries-old portrait of an unknown nobleman. Though the painting appears well preserved, staff members began noticing something strange. It seems to be aging. Over the years, visitors claimed that the man's hair appeared slightly grayer, his face more lined, and his eyes duller. Photographs taken decades apart show subtle but undeniable changes, the figure slowly growing older. However, art conservationists who have examined the painting confirm no alterations have ever been made. In Spain, there is an old farmhouse where messages mysteriously appear on the walls, written in no known handwriting. The first message was discovered in 1971, when the homeowner found strange words forming on the kitchen wall. At first, they assumed it was just an ink stain or a trick of the light, but over the next few days, the letters became clearer, forming full sentences. Soon, more messages appeared in different rooms, sometimes responding to questions people asked aloud. The house was inspected for hidden pipes, old writing that could be seeping through the walls, or other logical causes, but none were found. The writings were removed several times, but each time they returned. Even after new owners moved in, the messages kept appearing, as if the house itself had something to say. The Namib Desert in Africa is one of the most barren places on Earth, yet it holds a disturbing mystery. People have been vanishing from it for centuries, and no remains have ever been found. Reports date back hundreds of years, with travelers describing how entire search teams sent to find missing people would disappear themselves. One of the most chilling incidents occurred in 2010, when a group of 3 experienced hikers set off into the desert, equipped with GPS, satellite phones, and supplies. Hours later, their radio contact abruptly ended. When rescuers reached their last known location, they found their camp intact, but no sign of the hikers, only a single set of footprints that led into the sand, and then stopped, suddenly, as if they had vanished mid-step. In 1963, a man living in Turkey decided to renovate his basement. As he knocked down a wall, he stumbled upon a hidden tunnel, one that led to a massive underground city that had been sealed off for centuries. Archaeologists later discovered that this was Derinkuyu, an enormous underground settlement capable of housing over 20,000 people. It had ventilation shafts, storage rooms, living quarters, and even hidden passageways that allowed movement between levels without being seen from the surface. The deeper tunnels could be completely sealed from the inside, suggesting the city was designed as a fortress against outside threats. Despite being an astonishing discovery, no records exist of who built Derinkuyu, why it was abandoned, or how its existence was forgotten for centuries. In 1973, an astronomer in Australia was conducting routine sky observations when he saw something that defied all logic. A large, perfectly symmetrical structure appeared in the night sky, but only for a few minutes. The object didn't resemble any known celestial body, and its edges were too sharp and geometric to be natural. The astronomer quickly recorded the coordinates and tried to take a photograph, but the object vanished before he could capture it. Over the years, multiple attempts were made to locate the mysterious anomaly, but nothing in that region of space matched what he had seen. Some believe it was a never-before-seen cosmic event, while others suggest it may have been a glimpse into something beyond human understanding. In a small hotel in Tokyo, there is a particular room that guests rarely stay in for more than a few hours. Staff members say that every time someone rents the room, they check out early, sometimes in the middle of the night without explanation. Those who have stayed describe hearing soft knocking sounds from inside the walls, feeling an intense drop in temperature, and seeing their personal belongings shift positions while they sleep. In 1912, a rare book collector purchased a manuscript filled with unknown symbols, mysterious illustrations, and an indecipherable language. This book, now known as the Voynich manuscript, has baffled historians and codebreakers for over a century. Despite being studied by linguists, historians, and even AI algorithms, no one has ever been able to decode its language. The book also contains drawings of plants that don't exist, diagrams of unknown celestial bodies, and pages that seem to follow an unreadable pattern. Some believe it is an elaborate hoax, while others think it may contain lost scientific knowledge or the writings of an undiscovered civilization. In the mountains of Italy, there is an abandoned town called Krakow that looks as if its residents vanished overnight. Once a thriving medieval village, Krakow was evacuated in the 1960s due to a series of strange landslides and geological shifts. However, what makes it unsettling is that everything was left behind. Houses remain fully furnished, clocks still hang on the walls, and personal belongings were never retrieved. Unlike most abandoned places, Krakow was never looted, vandalized, or repopulated. It remains frozen in time, as if waiting for its former residents to return. Scientists believe the landslides were caused by an underground fault line, but others question why the town remains so perfectly untouched decades later. In 1977, astronomers at Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope were scanning the sky for potential extraterrestrial signals when they detected something unlike anything they had ever seen before. For exactly 72 seconds, a powerful signal originating from deep space was received, so strong that the astronomer on duty, Dr. Jerry Eman, circled the data on the printout and wrote a single word beside it: "Wow." What made the signal so strange was that it never repeated. Despite decades of attempts to detect something similar, nothing like it has ever been heard again. Theories have ranged from an unknown celestial object, an artificial signal from deep space, or an Earth-based transmission that bounced back in an unexpected way. But none of these explanations fully match what was recorded. To this day, the WOW signal remains one of the greatest cosmic mysteries ever detected.